Okay. This is an interview with Mr. Irvin Roberts on January 15th, 2007 at the Virginia Holocaust Museum in Richmond, Virginia. Interviewer is Inga W. Horowitz. The videographer is Chuck Weizenhofer. Mr. Roberts, you were witness to a death march encountered when you yourself were an American prisoner of war in Europe.
Yes.
Before you tell this story, I will ask you some basic background questions.
All right.
First, please state your name and spell it for us to be sure we have it right.
Irvin, Irvin, R. Roberts, Roberts. And I'm from Richmond, Virginia.
You were born in Richmond?
Born and raised in Richmond.
And what is the date of your birth?
March 5th, 1921.
Where did you live before your military service? Well, were you in Richmond?
Yeah, I was in
all
Richmond,
that time?
yes.
What was your civilian occupation before World War II?
Working on a railroad.
Really?
Yes, and I could, they didn't like it that I left the railroad. They said they needed men too, but I felt that all my friends had gone and there was a duty that I wanted to fulfill.
Were you drafted?
I was drafted, but I could have been referred by the railroad.
You could have been deferred.
Yes, they wanted to. They didn't like the idea that I left.
Mm-hmm. Tell me, what year were you drafted?
In 1942.
And you were then, if I have the figures right, 21 years old?
21 years
21. What branch or division of the armed forces did you enter? Was it Navy, Army?
Army.
Army. And do you remember your rank and serial number?
Well, when you went in as a private, and the serial number, I can't call it, but it's right here on this chart.
It is on that chart?
Yes.
Then we'll get a picture of it later.
I got the dog tag there.
Oh, on the dog
One
tag.
of the originals.
Right, right. And when you were discharged, what was your rank at that time?
Staff sergeant.
Staff sergeant. And what year were you discharged?
3 years and 1 day later.
3 years and 1 day later. What were your duties in the military?
I was a light tank driver.
Mm-hmm. And did you have any military decorations, and for what did you get them? And we will be looking later.
Mm-hmm.
Just tell me briefly, if you can.
Yes, I have military decorations for different battles I was involved in different areas that we were in.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been a long time, so you forget.
Yes.
Names and dates.
We will look at the your decorations later.
Yeah.
I remember seeing a Purple Heart.
Yes.
So you were injured.
It was a Purple Heart.
And Bronze Star.
2 Bronze Stars.
2 Bronze Stars.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when did you enter the European theater? When and where did you enter Europe? Was it D-Day or after?
No, we went over to England.
England.
When we first went over on the Queen Mary. We didn't go directly to England, and went by train from, what is it, Scotland, I think it was, I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
It was 10,000 troops. my outfit plus Canadian officers and nurses also. It was a loaded ship.
It was a loaded ship on the Queen
Yeah.
Mary. Do you remember when that was?
No, but I waved at the Statue of Liberty as I left.
You left from New York.
Yes.
And then from England you were taken where?
Well, from England, we were issued new equipment. Not new, but anyway, issued our equipment because we went over on the ship. We didn't carry anything. We just left the stuff that we had in Louisiana for the next outfit was coming in. And see, even maneuvered for a while in England. With armored infantry, it's a lot of training involved in working with armored infantry.
Yes.
And so while we were getting things together, we were still doing maneuvers.
Then you went to France?
Then we went to France, to Le Havre, France.
And where and when were you taken prisoner?
I don't, it was early part of December. And it was when the Battle of the Bulge was beginning.
Oh,
We
that was
knew it.
1944.
Yeah, we knew what we were going to. And he went down there and took up position for where the German was on an Autobahn, where the Germans were supposed to come through. They didn't come through that area because they knew we were there. And the Germans were told any obstacle they run into, go around it because they want to go as far into Germany as they could. And so that's where we were captured because the first wave of them went around us and we were beginning to run out of gas and everything.
You were in a tank.
In tanks.
Driving.
And they told us that we were surrounded by Germans and to head for the capital of Belgium. They didn't think they would take that. And the best thing to do is take your sidearms and fight your way back. Then we thought better than that, than just on foot, to break up in small groups and try to break through.
That was then your plan.
That was the plan. Some made it, a lot didn't. I was one that didn't.
You were captured.
Well, it actually was 5 days later.
Okay, tell us about that.
And well, and during that time, when we left our vehicles, we were dressed in fall weather clothing, lightweight, because it was mild weather. But within a few days, we had a 10-inch snow.
Oh.
And that's where I first began to have problems. When I was finally captured, my feet had frozen so bad, frostbite, that I couldn't get my shoes on for 3 or 4 days. Large blisters and everything. And they kept me, when I was traveling during the day in wooded areas, and when you get to an area where you could see German vehicles going through, it was one valley where they were going back and forth.
You were trying to...
I waited till night. And I hit another open spot, and I waited till night, but the snow had snowed. Full moon, the first time in 2 weeks. And I was walking up this hill by a fence, and I heard German voices. And I stopped.
Were you alone?
Alone. And I had a machine gun with me, and that was my sidearm. And I turned around real slow and start walking back down the hill, and they start shooting, hollering halt and so forth. So I stopped, so but several of them came down and carried me to the top of the hill, and I was right over the side of that hill was a large town. I walked right into them.
Mm-hmm.
And then that was the beginning of my being a prisoner.
Your imprisonment. Can you briefly describe, so that was December of 1944. You were a prisoner of war then until, how were you liberated?
By the British.
By the British. Mm-hmm. And that was, when was that, your liberation?
I think it's in the records at some time. It told me the last camp that I was in. But they moved us around to different places.
Yes, tell about what happened to you during your imprisonment.
Well, the first place we ended up, those that were captured in that area, and a lot of them were from the 52nd Division, in a warehouse by a railroad yard. Every night we'd go down there and fill bomb craters and repair track.
Mm.
And the next day, the American bombers would come over and tear it all to pieces again. So that was a every night affair going down there.
So they used you for labor.
Yeah, I was labor for the whole time. And but one thing about it, the food there, it wasn't a labor camp, so they didn't bring food in there.
They did.
And we would salvage out of the boxcars stuff that we could eat.
They did not bring food.
They did not bring food, and some of it, they used eating raw sugar beets, they call it. They used it for cattle feed.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It looked like a real large turnip.
Yes.
And one of the boxcars was loaded that was dried.
Mm-hmm. And
I filled my pockets because you couldn't eat but so much of it because it was, you didn't like it. And it was carried back and shared with some of the fellows that we had wounded there that we were burying during the day. They would die. They were badly shot up with no medical help whatsoever there.
Mm.
It's a pitiful place to be.
Do you know where you were?
No, ma'am, I do not.
Mm-hmm.
But not
it
far
was
from
somewhere.
this little town. It was in, well.
It was in Germany.
Yeah, it was in Germany, and because they left. We were ended up in from that place into Wittlich, Germany.
Wittlich.
Yeah, it's on that little map there. And
Yes.
I'll show you that.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, I seen the prisoners in America, with the camps that they had. Because when I was working for the railroad, they would come through.
Wait a minute. When you were working for the railroad,
they would bring Germans through their captured prisoners. And the soldiers would get over the top of the stand all over the train and guard them while they stopped in the yards.
That was in Germany?
No, right here in Richmond.
In Richmond?
And I had seen the camps that they had.
You saw German prisoners, soldiers,
Yeah.
who were here in this country in
Yeah.
camps. Okay, go
They
ahead.
were taking them to Canada.
I see. Uh-huh.
But then I'd seen the camps that they'd been in.
Mm-hmm.
And they were living real well. They had their own cooks. They had music when they played. And because the port of embarkation, they fed us there before we could board the ship. And the food was great. And I figured, well, the way they live it, that's what I was looking for in Germany.
As a prisoner.
But it's a prison, but it's no such thing. So it was such horrible conditions that anytime they was going to move people out, I'd get in line to go. I figured the next place it might be better than this.
Mm. And it was a very cold winter.
And the coldest winter on record.
Yes. Did you get warmer clothes as a prisoner?
No, I was lucky. I had half of the suit of my tank suit, which was bibbed overalls like, and it was fleece lined.
Oh.
During the snow, my feet would get so wet that at night when I lay down in the snow, try to scrape the snow away, it'll be on the ground, I'd take my socks and wring the water out of them, put them by my body, pull my bibbed overalls down over my feet to keep them warm. And that's the way it was for 5.5 days, as I was wandering around trying to find my way out of there.
Before they captured you.
Yes.
Right. You were very lucky to survive that.
Very lucky.
So during your entire imprisonment, you were used for labor and underfed?
Yes, because I ended up in a labor camp cutting wood.
Mm-hmm.
They had a 2-man French chainsaw. And I had worked and fiddled with outboard motors as a young boy. And knew a little bit about motors, and was started with a wide belt, a very hard engine to start. And I was about the only one in the crew could do it.
That could do it.
So that ended up as my job. And one time, when we went out, it rained. And we kept this chainsaw at a dairy barn up in the mountains. Most of those houses around there was little small towns and groups of villages, but the farms was just open fields. Everybody lived there. They had their stable would be on one side, the house on the other side.
So the houses and stables were in a town.
In a town.
And the fields were around the town.
Yeah, and they worked they even had the waste from the cattle in big bins. And they had a large pitcher pump.
A large what?
Pitcher pump, water pump.
Pump.
Hand operated. Because one time we were traveling, one of the guys got up there and wanted to get some water, and the Germans said, "Nick's good." Bad water.
Oh.
It's when it rains on it, it went into a basin underneath of it. They put that in wagon with barrels on them, not barrels, but a tank, wooden tank on it, and spread it in the fields. There was no waste to that.
They were using the waste from the cattle, but the water was contaminated.
Contaminated,
by
yes.
it. So you did interact with German citizens. They saw you.
Yeah, well, we would go
how
to
you were
one
treated
town every morning to go up in the mountains, and occasionally you might find an apple on a wagon sitting out there, or a little piece of beet or something like that. We always watched for that.
You were hungry.
Yeah, because what we were eating was they had military bread, and it's something that it wasn't tasteful at all. Basically, the filler was sawdust.
Oh my.
And I had found a recipe for it at one time and kept it for a long time and lost it. But it was real interesting to find out what it was. We knew it was because you could see the sawdust on the bread when they bring it in on blankets. And it was moldy, it was wet, it was heavy.
I imagine you
longer
lost
you keep
weight.
it, the better. Oh, I did. Pictures was taken in Brussels when I finally was released. And one of these little photo places, you go in there and get about 5 shots for $2 or so forth, and the wife tore them up.
She tore them up?
So bad.
Really?
I wish she kept them.
I wish she had kept them too.
Yes.
We'd have them here. Now, at one point, you had an encounter with people on a death march. Let's talk about that. Tell me what
This
happened.
was towards the end. It was getting close to the end of the war. The Germans were on a run. And one camp we was in, they were running down the road, even pulling cannons because they didn't have the horses to pull them.
The prisoners you encountered were pulling cannons?
No, these were the Germans themselves while we were in.
Oh.
We found a register with the International Red Cross, so they put us at a regular prison camp.
Mm-hmm.
And lost my train of thought. But anyway, they were pulling the wagons. And finally they moved us out of this camp where I was doing that wood because the Russians were getting close.
Mm-hmm. Where you were cutting wood.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I talked to a boy later that I met in North Carolina that was there, and he said the Russians just came there one morning and just opened the gate, told them which way to go back to the lines. And,
Told the soldiers, the prisoners?
the Americans which way to go to get back to the lines of the Americans.
Mm-hmm.
And so they could give him a shot. But they moved us. What they did, I was taken away from that camp because I was a non-commissioned officer.
Mm-hmm.
They took all the non-commissioned officers out of there because they didn't want them to be recaptured.
Mm-hmm. By the Russians?
Yeah, released by the Americans or anything. Mm-hmm. So they moved us out.
Mm-hmm.
And
under German guard?
Under German guard.
You were being moved out of that camp.
And from there, I took the longest train ride I've ever taken in my life.
Mm-hmm.
It was a whole train load of prisoners were put on these trains. The boxcars you have over here, 48,
Mm-hmm.
8 meals of 40 men. And it was hundreds of us on there. You couldn't even lay down.
You were in a boxcar.
For 14 days.
Oh, my.
The first night they put us in there, they dropped bombs, the Americans did. They bombed that yard. And you could hear the glass breaking in the windows of passenger cars on each side of it. And that is a horrible feeling. You couldn't run, you were locked in, there's nothing you could do but just that thing go through it. And there were injuries further down the line in one of those cars.
And you were packed in this car with other American prisoners of war.
With a 5-gallon can sitting in the middle of the floor for a toilet.
For a toilet.
And a lot of times it'd be several days. It was all over the floor. It was a nasty mess. It was sickening.
And 14 days?
14 days. Because they couldn't run during the day, because if they were seen during the day, they'd be shot at.
Mm-hmm.
One time we spent 3 days in a tunnel because they wouldn't run. And but during the night they would run, and we've been shot at several times. And it's a very frightening thing.
You couldn't escape when it stopped?
There was no way.
No
they
way.
wouldn't even let us out. We were begging for water and for food.
No, nothing to eat?
No,
Or...
they'd give us those beets. And one time they opened doors and passed water there, and generally as a rule you got enough to drink for that particular time. But it could be 2 days or more later before you get water again.
Were you under guard with
all
guns?
All time.
In uniform?
In uniform, yes.
And they were taking you east? West? Where? Do you know which way, where you were going?
I was thinking of the places. We ended up in a camp that wasn't too far from a town that they were bombing, far enough away we could see the planes going over and hear them dropping the bombs in that area. And But when I got off a train, you know, these boxcars are not very tall.
Uh-huh.
But when you jump to the ground, it fell right flat on their face. They're just so weak.
Weak. Mm-hmm.
It was amazing. You know,
Did you lose men in that boxcar?
Beg pardon?
Did men die in that?
Yes, not in that particular one, but when we got off of it, they were unloading bodies all that way up and down the line.
So there were more boxcars
All
of
right,
men.
and then in that town, we registered with the International Red Cross.
You registered?
Yeah, and then my family was notified I was a prisoner of war. I was missing in action.
I see. Until then you were missing in
And
there.
just missing in action.
And where is that where you encountered the death march? Where was that?
We moved from there to another regular prison camp. And we'd get one Red Cross parcel a month. Sometime between two men, sometimes you got the whole box yourself. And there was cheeses and the hardtack and cigarettes.
So this was
whatever.
more of a prisoner of war camp.
Yeah, this is the regular prisoner of war camp, first one I'd been in. And plenty of soldiers there, but occasionally you'd get a soup or something, and it looks like it was a bean soup with all kinds of beans in it, but and a lot of sauerkraut.
So,
That's why they
so
called
somewhat
some of the
better
generals.
treatment.
Yeah, well, there, because there was military supplies that was bringing that in. And it probably was further into Germany where they could bring it in. Because at the labor camp, many a time they were supposed to bring it in and it wouldn't show up for weeks. They couldn't get through with it.
So did they use you for labor out of this camp?
No, in this camp we just sat there. But the things were getting kind of rough for the Germans, and so they moved us out. We marched out of it. And that's when we encountered the other prisoners. They forced us off the road on the opposite side of the road. And I know it was at least a mile and a half of prisoners that you could see that had been in a prison camp for some length of time. Small children, older people, they could barely walk.
Small
Some
children.
of them were on blankets being dragged. Pitiful. They brought tears to your eyes to see it. You really didn't want to look at it. It was one of the worst sights I've ever seen in my life.
A mile and a half of people.
Just coming and going and begging. Little small children.
When they
But
saw,
older people. Why would they put that type of person in those prison camps?
you don't know where they were being marched
Don't-
to.
They were taken back because the British was coming into the area. They found our liberated us there.
So were they marching in the same direction you were
They
being
going
marched?
opposite of
Opposite direction.
Yeah. They were taking them away from the lines where the British were, so they couldn't be liberated and send us up there.
How were those people dressed? You mentioned
Ragged,
blanket.
just barely clothed. A lot of them had rags wrapped around their feet.
Was there anything that was identifying you as Americans when they passed you?
No, we had what left of our uniforms. You could see that we were American
Americans.
soldiers. Most of us had helmets because that was the first thing you did when you got there. The first food that I got was they put us in a civilian prison in Wittlich, Germany. And if they had the sauerkraut for supper, there was soup. And the first thing you learn to do is you clean your helmet.
Mm.
Take a quarter and scrape it, get every bit the paint out of it. And each time you use it, you do your best to clean it up.
And that was your
But
soup bowl.
That was my bowl to eat.
So
my
you still
food
had
from
your
then
American
on.
helmet.
No, they took all that away from me. I could have kept it, but I didn't know that.
But these people that you encountered could tell that you were not Germans.
Yeah, yeah. No, they were begging food and everything, but
They tried
the German guards said not to, and they'd run. And if it break out, they'd beat them with rifle butts. Kids.
You saw that.
Yeah, I saw that. And older people too, just knock them down. Some of them couldn't even get up.
What happened to the ones that couldn't get up?
The others come along and put them on blankets, dragged them on.
Dragged them.
Yeah. We had our own men do the same thing. Some of them couldn't make it. And the sad part about it, that we were in such bad shape. And if you got a hold of a blanket, which I have done, but I was having bad trouble with my feet. And I couldn't do it. And I prayed to God I could get where I could help them.
So you were under guard, German guard?
Yes, the whole time.
And they were under German guard.
They were under German guards. Most of the ones that I've ever been under as guards are some young ones, but we used to have to walk up in the mountains, and when you're passing through the town, you have some German soldiers might be marching by, walking as a group, and you don't dare look at them. Because if you do, they'll come up and butt you real hard, or accidentally hit you with a rifle butt. For no reason.
For no reason. You had
It's
to
cruelty.
keep your eyes downcast.
Yeah, yeah.
About how many people, you say 1.5 miles, you had to get off the road to let them go by? About how
for
many?
Goodness sakes,
You can't tell. Really.
It was hundreds, thousands maybe, because they were walking and were marching just as a group.
Yeah.
And sometimes it was 5 or 6 wide, walking just a constant stream of them. I often wondered just where they were going.
And where they came from.
But
where they were
yeah,
going.
that's right. But I have seen those furnaces
Yes.
from a slight distance, because they very open with it. And
Were there
the civilians said they didn't know it. They couldn't help for knowing it. The odor, burning flesh, it's an awful odor.
Yes. Tell me, Mr. Roberts, were these people Jews, or did you know who they were?
Well, they said it was a mixture of political prisoners.
Who said that?
We were told that.
You were told?
We were told that. Other than that, why would they have a child there?
A child. It was not a political prisoner.
It's not a political prisoner.
And do you remember their clothing, their lack of shoes, many of them with just feet wrapped up
Yeah.
in something? Do you remember a smell or talking or any other what you experienced?
No, you try not to look at them because you didn't want to encourage them to come over there.
You didn't want to
No,
encourage them to
no,
come to
didn't,
you.
for any reason. For their own safety.
Yeah. So you had no real communication with them.
But it's something that I can just think about it and just see it, just as though it happened yesterday. That's what bothers your nerves and everything when you come home. And You didn't talk to me. I had a neighbor that I have known for years, and when I finally got these medals together, he said, Irvin, I didn't realize you had so many medals.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't talk about it. They don't understand. And when I started at the VA hospital, I had a black social worker, young man, started that group, the POWs there.
Mm-hmm.
We had meetings once a week at night, and I attended every one of them.
When did...
All right, then we would just talk about any and everything. You could talk to another prisoner. He knew what you were talking about. You could understand what he was talking about.
So it was when you finally...
And when you're talking to them, even at work, I never said nothing to the guys there at work.
We'll get to this a little later. It's very interesting how you express that. I wanted to ask you a little bit more. Did you see any signs of resistance in the soldiers that you were being marched with, or among these people on the death march? I assume that was what they called a death march.
Yeah, well...
Was there any resistance?
I think the soldiers that was there, their thoughts was almost the same. They didn't know what they were going into. As a new preacher moved in the area, that was the church that I was going to, and he came down to visit me. And he said, "Do you believe in prayer?" I said, "I certainly do, because somebody answered mine."
Mm-hmm.
The things that I was going through,
I
asked
can
for help.
imagine that.
Wake up in the night and wander around in the dark and think you hear somebody talking or something and listening.
When this was going on, this encounter, the death march, your marching, were any German civilians around witnessing this?
None whatsoever.
Nobody. You didn't see?
Not a soul. You very seldom saw them when we were on the road. I think they had told us they off the road. Mm-hmm. Wouldn't let them in the area.
Had any previous experiences or training prepared you for what you saw there?
No, none whatsoever.
Even your own suffering had not prepared you for that?
No.
Had you known any...
such a thing would be possible that people would be treated like that.
Had you known any Jews before your military service or during?
Not lots of them.
You did know Jews here in Richmond.
I had friends.
What were your views of anti-Semitism before you went to war? Did you think about it?
No, I didn't even know they were involved in such a way as it was. There have been lots of jokes told about the Jews, such as they're business people, very shrewd business people. And the ones that I knew the most were ones that run stores in the areas. And they always talk to me like the Yankees, because a lot of them come from New York. Mm-hmm. And I know one time I went to New York for the company to do some work there and to hear the people talk. It reminds me more as much as my childhood. The Jewish that I knew then, would talk, because a lot of them were from north.
Mm-hmm. You grew up in Richmond in Fulton, did your wife say?
Right there is what they call Rockets.
Rockets Landing.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
At the far river she'd come. Where I live, I was a block and a half from the river.
Uh-huh.
And I was 5 years old when we left Fulton. Mm-hmm. And I've been down there in that area. I learned learned to swim in the rocks later in the river. And
so where you did know Jews in Richmond was later on, after?
No, I dealt with one of them that I used to buy outboard motors and boats from, Carwich Marine, right there.
Carwich Marine, yeah.
And I liked the man, but you had to be real careful because he'd take advantage of you.
Really?
But I liked him.
Well, that was him. It might not have been typical of all as we know now, right?
I know that.
Right.
I know that. But it's like anything else. They pull like the people that pick on them a lot, and there's nothing wrong with them. I have a lot of good friends that are Polish.
Yeah. After your own liberation, and you were still in Germany then, did you see any displaced persons or DP camps?
No, once we were liberated by the British, they took us out the same day.
Took you where?
Well, they took us out to a camp that they had, and then if they clothed us, give us bath. Because another big problem we had, the warehouse that we slept in at that labor camp, it looked like it might have been a schoolhouse at one time because it had a stage in there where they used, and it had the front of it. It was some other people I never did see them. They passed them some cigarettes through the door one time, but the word got around. They gave us some clothes and some jackets and old coats. You cut the bottoms off and slide them on that door, and then make mittens for you. Slide them back through there. And that was some of the things that...
These were local people?
No, they were prisoners. But we don't know who they were. Because in a regular prison camp, they had Russians, and then they'd have the French, and then Americans, Canadians, and English in 3 different sections. I've seen those guys go in there and just kick the door down in the Russian. You could hear them shooting in there. You have no idea what happened or anything like that. But
so from that camp, you were shipped back to the United States? After your liberation, you were in a camp, and then your duties in Europe were over?
Well, they flew us from that English camp to Brussels.
I see.
And there we were supposed to fly out, but they didn't. They took us by train.
That's where you had that picture taken, where you looked so emaciated. The pictures in Brussels.
And I bought a souvenir. It's an ashtray. There's a statue there that the king saw his little boy standing there peeing into the pond.
Right.
And it's a lady here that has been volunteered for years. She was there. She remembers the statue. And I told her, I used this ashtray, you know, they get stained. And I told her I was going to clean it up and take a picture of it so I can give it to her. But
yes, I know that statue too. It was called Menik and Pish.
I don't know what it was, but it was cute.
We're diverting. Let's get back. Tell me, what was your conclusion about Hitler and Nazism?
It was a madman.
He was a madman?
He was a madman. He was going to try to take over the world.
That's right.
Look what he did to the countries. Marched right in and captured some of them without firing a shot. I'm glad he went into Russia. That's brought him to a halt.
That finally stopped
That
him.
was beginning of his downfall.
Yes, he tried to too much.
And well, it's just like over there, and where they're fighting now. People have tried to take that country for years and years. Even the Russians went in there. That's where they got all those mountains and the caves in the mountains and everything, and they've never done it.
Right. Tell me, today, your career after the military service, just very briefly, what did you do in your with your life
Well,
after that experience?
Worked with automobiles and apprentice with the service, and for 14 years. And the man that owned the business retired, and I went with one of the mechanics had been a truck mechanic.
Mm-hmm.
And we went to another place, and back then the things were slowing down, and they said the second shift we was working on, they've been trying to close it for years, and said if it gets any worse, they could do it, and they did.
Mm-hmm.
And he and I were the last two there, so we were the first six that was laid off.
Mm-hmm.
And I went with another truck place that did the same thing.
And where did you end up before your retirement? Where did you retire from?
Retired, I worked with, I was moving from job to job.
Mm-hmm.
The service-related problems I was having.
What were your service-related?
Well, I worked for American Machine and Foundry
Mm-hmm.
for 10 years. I was a good mechanic, well liked. But I had a foreman who worked his way up through the ranks. That was very hard. And he wasn't a foreman, he was a shop superintendent.
Mm-hmm.
And he would come to me to get me to do jobs. For some reason, he didn't like me.
Mm.
And get me to do jobs and everything. And finally, there was one machine that was a bread wrapper. That I knew that machine from one end to the other.
Mm-hmm.
All right, they would start rebuilding them, take them in and rebuild them. Well, that's one thing I got where I didn't like the automobile business. The oil stains in your hands would get so bad that you couldn't even clean your hands.
Mm-hmm.
You go to the, my wife worked at Tallhammer's, and I went to Tallhammer's to the tea room to dinner one day with her, met her. I had to hide my hands, it's so bad. You know how your hands would get stained in the wintertime, they crack, and that oil, you couldn't,
So you were a mechanic.
yes. And so
And you're...
when the bread wrappers, I told him, I said, Frank,
Mm-hmm.
you get a crew over here, and I'll teach them how to strip these things down and let them clean them. And I'll rebuild them.
Mm-hmm.
No, no, you got to do the whole thing. I said, I'll quit first.
So where did you end your career? Did you retire from American Machine and Foundry?
No, I went from there to even a better place, which was Mullins.
Mullins.
And they made cigarette machines.
Mm-hmm. I've heard of them.
They started in, the man that started it, and it was in Cuba.
Let me go back now to your experience. Have you ever returned to Germany since your war experience? Did you ever go back?
No, I never did. I wanted to.
Have
not
you
not
been
to Germany. I would like to go back to England.
to England?
That was a lovely place.
Have you been able to separate your feelings for Nazis from your feelings about Germans?
No, I don't have anything against the Germans. They followed the lead of a leader that was a madman, and he promised he would do this and he would go do that. And I was listening to a speech he made within the past week, He said, you won't recognize Germany in 10 years from now, what he's going to do with the country, this, that, and the other. And then it showed Germany being
Made promises.
torn all to pieces. That's what happened 20 years later.
Mm-hmm. A 1,000-year Reich he was building.
Yeah, because...
Have you met any concentration camp survivors since leaving the Army? Have you ever met a person who survived that?
Well, the 52nd used to get together once a year.
Mm-hmm.
And the first time they had it in Hampton, I didn't know about it, and I was close, but I was farming. I had bought a farm, and I built 3 houses since I got out of service. And I was pretty tied down with building my house and everything. Couldn't afford any long trips. We were on several. We went not many years ago to Valley Forge.
Mm-hmm.
And the old company commander was still there. There's still a lot of but
So you started going to the veterans, the 52nd. You were in the 52nd,
infantry.
the 9th Armored Infantry and the 52nd Battalion.
Yeah.
Battalion. And
We had,
so you are with a veterans group, and when you...
Oh, I'm with several.
Yes, you're with several veterans
Yeah.
groups. We'll look at your uniform in a minute, because that's written on the back, the one that you're with.
I got a bunch of cards in my pocket from
Oh, really?
the different ones I belong to. Generally, anything I have ribbons for.
So on your return from Europe, when did you begin to talk about your war experiences?
Still don't.
When?
I still don't.
You still don't? Among your
People don't understand.
among your buddies, you talk about it.
Some. But
When
just
you
like
get
that friend of
together.
mine for this boy and his wife, her mother and my parents, before I was ever born, lived next door to each other. And we've known them. I've known her. I met her years ago when she was still in high school.
Mm-hmm.
And she married a boy from the Navy. And he lived there and started a Verona refrigeration business, and he retired now. But when he saw these medals, he said, Irvin, I didn't realize you had so many medals.
Mm-hmm.
You just don't talk
You
about
don't talk about it. How did the war experience change your life?
it. Ruined it.
You feel like it ruined it?
Not in spirit, but I'm an old man, I know that. But I just can't do the things that I used to do.
Do you have flashbacks?
Oh, Lord, I dream about it. I didn't sleep at all last night,
Really?
thinking about what I was going to be able to talk about to you.
Really?
But I do that quite often.
What insight did you learn that you could pass on to those who were not there? What would you say?
Just be damn lucky they won't, excuse me,
Lucky they weren't there.
won't they? I'm thinking about these kids that are being sent over there right now.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Young, 23, 24-year-olds. See pictures of them as they're being killed.
At that time when you went, you were married.
Yes, 6 months.
You had been married 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
And then your wife, then you had children after the war.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about your children.
Well, the son was born 9 months, or just a few months after I got overseas, because she was following me from camp to camp as much as she could.
When you were still in the United States?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
She went to Fort Riley.
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't even been there long enough to get off post.
Mm-hmm.
And she showed up and sold a bicycle. I put a motor on it. Used it for train fare, came out there.
Isn't that wonderful?
And she worked mostly with doctors' wives who were pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
They needed somebody there. And most of the time at Fort Riley, they had brick buildings all
What
over the
was your
place.
first wife's name?
Myrtle.
Myrtle. And your son was born, was his name?
Kenneth.
Kenneth.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, there were more children after the war, right?
Well, Kenneth, she was pregnant with him
Mm-hmm.
when she left Louisiana.
Mm-hmm.
And the lady wanted to stay on while I was gone.
Mm-hmm.
And the same one when we were in Kansas, but we went from Kansas to Arizona,
Mm-hmm.
which is no place to be because we were 25 miles from the middle of the desert, which was needles. It was just a whistle stop. And so there was no quarters or anything like that for him to stay.
Mm-hmm.
So she didn't go there.
Well,
And the lady wanted to stay, but she got homesick after I left, so she went home.
so now you have how many children?
Just the three.
3 children.
Mhm.
And we will look at the
2 girls and a
pictures
boy.
in a minute. 2 girls then after
Yeah.
the son.
'Cause
And
Kenny
then-
was 9 months old when I met him.
Pardon me?
Kenny was 9 months old when I.
When you first met your
First- my
son,
first
he
son.
was 9 months old.
He didn't like me.
You had to
He
get
was-
to
he
know
was-
him.
He was jealous.
Yes. He had
that
had
somebody
his
else was
mother.
mother.
Right, right. And then you lost your first wife
Yes, at 42 years old with cancer.
and left you with
The-
3
just,
children.
Just one. The other 2 were married.
The other 2 were already married
Yeah.
when she was 42. And then you remarried, and your second wife is,
I won't even call her name. It didn't work. She was a mean woman, and it was a Cinderella thing with my daughter, and it didn't work out at all.
oh, you had another marriage in
Yeah,
between. I
yeah.
see. Don't call her name then.
Yeah,
But
that
now
was-
you're married to
Yeah, to Shirley.
Shirley.
And 15, 18 years, long than that.
Mm-hmm. I think she told me 1985
Yeah, something like
the
that.
2 of you were
Mhm.
married.
I took her to
Tell
the
me,
river.
how do you answer people who say what happened in Europe to the Jews, that never happened, that the Holocaust never happened? How do you answer people?
I tell them that's not so, that I saw it, and I said, I know those people, and it should never have happened.
It's just not so.
It happened, but they say it's not so. And that's so far from the truth as you shouldn't even say it.
Right. Do you have any last memory that you would like to share, Mr. Roberts?
Well, there were several things that happened. One day when they removed the non-commissioned officers, I think it was about 12 of us, from that camp, we was walking back to the Whitledge, where it was a civilian prison. That's where we hid
Whitlig.
Whitledge. It's on that map there.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, this soldier in uniform, German, sitting there, and he said, "It's a hell of a war, fellas."
It's a hell of a war.
And American, it was with a northern accent. It was in Boston.
Oh.
Now, some of them I know went back when they went to war, you know, with their motherland or whatever they call it. But this guy said he went back to Germany to settle his grandmother's estate when the war started.
I see.
And he was a political prisoner.
Mm-hmm.
He said it's keep him go to a concentration camp, which he was real lucky to do. he volunteered to service. They wouldn't let him go up on the front line, but he was driving a truck.
Mm-hmm.
He said the truck was right back there in the woods with no gas. I'm sitting here waiting for get gas.
Mm-hmm.
And the letter that I've got, when I left that labor camp, I had been working with this one guard. He was with the group that used this chainsaw.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, he couldn't speak English, but we had these books, you know, that translate American English. And, and we worked it out. If we give him a name of a relative or somebody, that he would get in touch with them or write them a letter, that he saw us, so we're in good shape and where we were at that time, which he did.
Mm-hmm. He wrote to your wife?
He wrote to my brother.
To your brother.
And
so he was a German guard in
yes.
that camp where you were imprisoned.
Yeah. All right, but when I got out, I didn't want no parts of the war. I didn't bother. I was going to write him, but then I couldn't get the...
But
couldn't
then...
really see it was the envelope that I had.
Then he wrote to you in 1947.
He wrote to my brother.
To your brother, because he had that address. And you wanted me to read that letter.
Well, not only that, when we finally got in touch with him, my granddaughter did it. She found it, and she knew about it, so she said, let me work with it. She likes to work with computer. And she got in touch with him, but she found his sister. He had died, had passed away.
But let me read what he wrote in his sort of broken English. This was a guard who was...
Well, he got someone to write this for him.
Oh, Dear Drowan, and that's your brother's name?
Raymond.
Raymond. You will wonder to get a letter from Germany. I will keep to very promise and will write you a few lines. I often thought of you since I returned from Klüsserath. How long did you bear with the wood cutting?
That was where we were.
That was the camp.
With the camp.
It looks like K-L-U-S-S-E-R-A-T-H. How long did you bear with the wood cutting? How was the watchman who came to relieve me? Was you content with him? I wanted to stay with you, but it wasn't possible. For a soldier is a soldier. Now I hope that you arrived your native country in the best health. Well, I was made prisoner by the 9th American Panzer Division after having made a race outing across whole Germany. It was in April. The first time it was not agreeable. Later on I was convicted to a Sprengkommando. There I was about 6 months. Then I was sent back to my native country. Here in Germany it looks, our town is disturbed 90%. I had good luck. My house is invisible. I don't know that word. This time we had a very cold and strong winter. This was after the winter of 46, 47. He wrote in April 47. Hamburg, and that's where he was living then.
That's
Hamburg are frozen to death because we got no coal and no wood and because the houses are gone. We all hope never again to endure such a winter. Now we are in great hope for the next harvest. How it looks in Germany you will read in newspapers. Now I will finish my letter, hoping to get soon some lines from you. Hearty greetings, your comrade, Karl Moelle, M-O-E-L-L-E. So he was one German who had...
He was a nice man.
Was a nice man and cared. Let's now look at your pictures.
Well, another thing.
You have another memory to share?
Yeah, with him.
Yes.
When we were cutting wood, they got behind the weather. So they sent us up there one Sunday to kind of catch up.
Mm-hmm.
We got started and it started raining.
Mm-hmm.
Well, at the farm we kept this saw in. There was a family there. It was a boy, and mother, and father. We went over to the shed. He's allowed to pull that wood out, fallen trees and stuff. So we went there and cut all that up for him. And while we were doing that, she cooked a dinner of boiled potatoes and cracklings. You know what I'm talking about there.
From, yes, crackling.
And then there was some bread that she baked.
Mm-hmm.
It was almost like eating a piece of cake.
After eating sawdust.
Yeah, and they gave us a tall glass of apple cider. Well, I'm not a drinking man. And the little boy said, you drink it, you do this.
Uh-huh.
Well, after that meal, going up that mountain away from there, I was floating. I was lightheaded, and it was a wonderful feeling.
Mm-hmm. So they really, you had some interaction with decent
but she
people.
used to bring a bucket of milk over there in the mornings
Mm-hmm.
and give each one of us a glass. I never liked milk, but I drank it because I knew it'd be good for me.
Right.
And she said, if an officer comes, hide it.
Oh.
You know, somebody comes in to set it down.
Let's see, this is now a picture of
Will we
you.
stand up with you?
If you want to, why don't you do this?
Want your,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me just,
I'll take it.
I'll hold that.
I got it.
Oh, you got it, okay. Why don't you point out to us and tell us what we're looking at here?
That's me as a private.
As a
One of the
private,
first pictures was taken.
a good-looking private.
This was taken when we were in Louisiana. Kansas, I think. But we had stopped.
But that's you and your
the
first
bivouac,
wife.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a little in Texas, and there was a little country house there, and this farmer invited the two girls. There was another girl that was real close to us that we used to chum around together, and to spend the night with us. And they were making cooking down syrup from corn, not corn, cane.
Sugar cane
And
syrup.
had a horse going around and very interesting, but he said not to breathe too much of it because you'll be so hoarse the next morning you can't talk.
Oh,
from
really?
Steam, yeah.
So this is your wife, Myrtle.
Myrtle, that was Myrtle.
And here she is again in the print dress and your children. And we decided that must have been about 1960.
Mm-hmm.
Your son and your two daughters. What are their names again? He is, your son's
This
name?
is Kenneth.
Oh, that's Kenneth. I'm sorry.
That's my son.
This is you.
That's me.
You look so young.
That's the old man.
Uh-huh.
Yes, this is Myrtle, and this is Bonnie. This is the baby.
Bonnie.
She was 9 when her mother died. And this is Dale. This is, boy, she's getting old now.
Okay, so Kenneth and Dale and Bonnie.
Yeah.
And here you are. You'll have to step back a little maybe.
Yes.
With Shirley.
Yes, that was the picture was taken at the church that we started going to down there, 4 Mile Creek.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, had to make the album every year, so they asked us to.
In the album.
Yeah, for
That's a
our
nice
pictures,
picture.
yes.
And this is your certificate
For the Purple Heart.
for the Purple Heart, established by General George Washington. Irvin Roberts, then technician, 4th grade, Army of the United States, for wounds received in action on 21 December 1944 in the European theater. And then over here we have I think maybe we'll try to put this up. Let me see, just a minute, so that you can look at. Okay. This is so beautiful. But before you do that, Mr. Roberts, turn around and let Chuck get a view of the back of your veteran's jacket. A little bit further. You belong to the Denny Landrum chapter, XPOW. Okay, now
Yeah, the story behind that, the gentleman who they named us after was a prisoner, the Japanese.
Denny Landrum.
Denny Landrum, he had a bad kidney and it actually tore it out of his body. He survived. But it was the doctor that did it, but you know.
Now can you see this all right? No glare? All right. Your granddaughter, was that Bonnie who did this?
Bonnie did
the
this.
youngest one.
Yes.
And here is your serial number. It is 33229863.
I remember it for
That's
years.
the serial number. And here is the Purple Heart. And here is the Bronze Star.
And I have two bronze
This
stars.
bar means that you have a
have two.
two, right. And here are all of the other medals, which will be in this film. Well, Mr. Roberts, thank you so very much for sharing your
I hope I could kind of clear things up for some of the people that don't realize just what went on.
I think you have.
And if there's any questions that you want to call me anytime, that I might be able to help.
Well, if we get some deniers in here, we'll send them your way. Deniers who say it didn't happen.
Yeah, do that. Do
Yes.
that. I'll argue with them.
My hand is cold. I thank you very much.
You're certainly welcome.